story of the Finder, found in Ursula K. Leguin's Tales from Earthsea, is in part the story of the young man, Otter, Tern, Medra, different names that he goes by, who is indeed a finder, but it's also a much larger story and a much more important story about the founding of the School of Magic and of the high arts at Roke. Now, Roke Island is already a very magical place. The imminent grove is there. The women of the hand had already, for at least several hundred years, established a community of magic users that were extending their power out secretly into the other isles of Earthsea in its dark times. But the establishment of an actual school and the decision to turn away from complete isolation and back again outward to Earthsea is a very important one, and it is founded in a concern for freedom. They realize that the only way that they can be truly free is to bring freedom to others, to prepare the way for an Earthsea that will not be such a terrible place. So they set this up as a school, as Ember says, where the wise might come to learn from one another, to study the pattern the grove would shelter us. And they talk all winter about it, all the wise women of the island. What was the true art of magic? Where did it turn false? How the balance of things was kept or lost? What crafts were needful? Which useful? Which dangerous? Why people had one gift but not another? Whether you could learn an art you had no native gift for. In such discussions, we learn they worked out the names that have ever been given to the masteries: finding, weatherworking, changing, healing, summoning, patterning, naming, and the crafts of illusion and the knowledge of the songs. Those are the arts of the masters of Roke even now, though the chanter took the finder's place when finding came to be considered a merely useful craft unworthy of a mage. It was in these discussions the school on Roke began, Ursula K. Leguin tells us, and she is the one who would know, right? It's her secondary world. Then she tells us there are some who say the school had its beginnings far differently, and she gives us some sort of misogynistic thing that the wizards of the present day tell themselves, and she says, well, this is all bunk. There's a bit of truth to it here and there, but it's mainly made up stuff. And, it's interesting that she's actually giving us an insight into the fabrication of origin stories. And this is quite important, because we're going to see that there are tensions arising even in the early days of Roke. First, though, we should talk about Tern, who is Medra, and his finding. Finding is his art, right? And so he's been finding ore underneath the earth before. He's been, finding other things. Now he's going to find people. And his first finding mission is taking Crow, who very much loves books but doesn't have any magical talent, to try to find the Book of Names. And eventually they go to a lot of places, find various books here and there, and then eventually they arrive on some women of the hand making the sign, and then they find a book, right? A witch's den, healers. And they wind up finding not just the Book of Names, but the very first student for Roke, a young woman named Dory, who will go back with them. And in the process, Crow finds his profession. We read, the school on Roke got its first student from across the sea, together with its first librarian. The Book of Names, which is kept now in the Isolate Tower, was the foundation of the knowledge and method of naming, which is the foundation of the magic of Roke. The girl Dory, who, as they said, taught her teachers, became the mistress of all healing arts and the science of herbals, and established that mastery and high honor at Oak. As for Crow, unable to part with the Book of Names even for a month, he sent for his own books from Oremy and settled down with them in Twill. He allowed people of the school to study them so long as they showed them and him due respect. So that is the beginning of the outward journeys. And then we find out that there are voyages every year that Tern is doing in his ship Hopeful, seeking out students of magic, potential people for Roke. In late spring, he would go out seeking and finding people for the school, children and young people, mostly who had a gift of magic, sometimes grown men and women. Most of the children were poor, though he took none against their will. Their parents or masters seldom knew the truth. And he winds up becoming a scary figure, the child taker, a dreaded sorcerer who carried children to his island in the icy north and sucked their blood, right? But at that time, there were many people of the hand who knew what was afoot on Roke. Also, young people are being sent to Roke. Men and women came to be taught and to teach. So we have both the finder going out and finding students, and we have the hand sending people inward. And Roke is now developing into something, and they don't quite know exactly what form it's going to take. But there's two things that are really centrally important. One is building the house, the great house of Roke, the one that we find out about in A Wizard of Earthsea, right? When he goes to Roke from Gaunt. The beginning of the third novel as well, The Farthest Shore, when Arryn goes into the house. And building the house is much easier than, as they say, building the rule. They have to settle the issue of the rule. And Ember says, "Off you go and leave us to settle this matter." And Tern says, "I'll stay if you want." And she says, "I do want you to stay, but don't stay. You're a finder. You have to go to find. It's only that agreeing on the way or the rule, Warris wants us to call it, is twice the work of building the house and causes 10 times the quarrels. I wish I could get away from it." And he says, "Why do we quarrel?" And there's going to be a discussion of that later where they'll say, well, different people have different interpretations and they come from different areas. So culture plays a role in the quarreling. But Warris also has some ideas of his own that go against, you could say, the ethos, the egalitarianism of the women of the hand who've been running Roke. And she says, "Gather 20 or 30 people of power in a room. They'll each seek to have your own way. If you put men who've always had their way together with women who've had theirs, they'll resent each other. Then there are some true and real divisions. They must be settled." And he says, "Is it Warris?" Warris and several other men, and they are men, and they make that important beyond anything else. To them, the old powers are abominable, and women's powers are suspect because they suppose them connected with the old powers, as if those powers were to be controlled or used by any mortal soul. But they put men where we would put the world, and so they hold that a true wizard must be a man. That's one issue right there. And celibate. They also want to have their own room or their own wing of the house so they can be pure. And what we see here is a kind of separatism that leads to a domination. This is eventually going to lead to the male-dominated Roke that we encounter in the other Earthsea novels, when it wasn't that way to begin with. And she says, "It's not my word, it's Warris's. They want the rule of Roke to separate men from women, and they want men to make the decisions for all. Here's the big problem. What compromise can we make with them? Why did they come here if they don't want to work with us?" And he says, "Well, we should send away the men who won't." And she says, "Away in anger to tell the lords of Wathord or Havnor that witches on Roke are brewing a storm." So they're kind of stuck with these guys. And that will eventually lead to them dominating. We also find that there is an attack from Havnor itself, led by the wizard Early, the apprentice of Gellick, who has gotten Losen's fleet at his disposal, we find that they're unable to actually make much headway against Roke, and Early flies to Roke and tries to attack it, and what he finds out is that things are far too powerful there for him. All the rumors of Roke said it was spell defended and charm hidden. If there were any spells about that hill or bay he now saw opening, they were gossamer to him, transparent. He lands as a dragon and then suddenly stands in his own form, and then they ask him, "Tell me your name." And he said, "Teriel." "Why did you come here, Teriel?" "To destroy you." And she says, "Destroy us? Destroy this hill, these trees here? Maybe Segway, who made them, could unmake them. Maybe the earth will destroy herself. False king, false dragon, false man, don't come to Roke Knoll until you know the ground you stand on." And he sees there's many other people. He thinks that he's going to make a spell, but he made no spell. He had no magic left in him. It was gone, run out of him into this terrible hill, into the terrible ground under him. He was no longer a wizard, only a man like the others, powerless. And that's the end of Early. That's the end of the attack on Roke. And what do we find here? Well, the Roke has organized itself into a school through goodwill, also through conflict. And we find that there are not just students, but there are indeed masters. As we mentioned, Dory becomes the master herbal. Ember becomes the master patterner. We have the others, the summoner, the changer, the namer, and we have a master finder. Medra is originally the master finder. When his love, Ember, dies, he goes to the grove and he leaves that behind, and a new finder arises in his place. And we have a vignette towards the very end of the story itself that is going to show us his place. Here we go. Growing old, Elahal, that's Ember's true name, wearied of the passions and questions of the school and was drawn more and more to the trees. Where she went alone as far as the mind can go, Medra walked there too, but not so far as she, for he was lame. After she died, he lived for a while in the small house near the grove. One day in autumn, he came back to the school. He went in by the garden door, which gives out on the path through the fields to Roke Knoll. It is a curious thing about the great house. There is no portal or grand entryway at all. You can enter by the back door, which, though it is made of horn and framed in dragon's tooth, looks like nothing at all from the outside. Or you can come in by the garden door, but there is no front door. He came in through the halls and stone corridors to the inmost place. Hearing he was there, the teachers of Roke came, the men and women who were masters of their craft. Medra had been the master finder till he went to the grove. A young woman now taught the art as he had taught it to her. And here is an important innovation. "I've been thinking," he said, "there are 8 of you. 9's a better number. Count me as a master again, if you will." "What will you do, Master Turn?" asked the summoner, a gray-haired mage from Ilion. "I'll keep the door," Medra said. "Being lame, I won't go far from it. Being old, I'll know what to say to those who come. Being a finder, I'll find out if they belong here." "That would spare us much trouble and some danger," said the young finder. "How will you do it?" the summoner asked. "I'll ask them their name," he smiled. "And if they tell me, they can come in. And when they think they've learned everything, they can go out again if they can tell me my name." So it was for the rest of his life. Medra kept the doors of the great house on Roke. The garden door that opened upon the knoll was long called Medra's Gate, even after much had changed in the house as the centuries passed through it. And still the 9th master of Roke is the doorkeeper. And so that is how the story ends, with the institution of Roke now established, heading towards, unfortunately, male domination and female exclusion, but well-founded in Earthsea to take up its mission as a force of goodness, of freedom, and of teaching and learning in this world that Ursula K. Le Guin created.